The next presenter, the next speaker, have been looking very much forward to present him. He's come all the way from the United States of America to tell us a little bit about what IPD actually is and how they use it in America. Because when we started planning this conference, there was no doubt in the board's mind that the first day should be about IPD. We were all, most of us, at the IGLC 2014 in Oslo, and heard a little bit about IPD there. But when we came to think of it, none of us actually knew what IPD was. We knew the basics, but we didn't know exactly how it worked. So when we sat there and said IPD is a good idea, we thought at the same time we have to have someone who can actually help us tell us what it is. So we contacted David Long, and he's been willing to come all this way to tell us what it is and how you use it in America. So welcome, David.
Well, thank you for the welcome, and we'll see in 30 minutes just how welcome I am. There's one thing is you're recording this, and on my projects we have one rule: never take a picture of me from behind. So if I don't turn my back on a camera, I'm good, I guess. Okay, well, so. Just a touch of a background. The reason that, or a couple of reasons that I'm asked to do these is, one, I'm very good friends with Glenn Ballard, and Glenn actually thought that he was going to be here, but had a conflict, and so now I'm Glenn. That happens to me occasionally. I'm also very good friends with Greg Howell, so if you're aware of that, Greg and Glenn invented the last planner system. And also very good friends with Will Lichtig, who wrote the first relational contract in the United States. And also very good friends with Alan Mossman, who has enabled me to drink heavily every time I get a chance. Thank you, Alan. That may be the most valuable of my friends. So, in a little bit more seriously, I had the opportunity I was working for Sutter Health, a healthcare company in Northern California, in 2003, and we had a history of broken projects, projects that were over budget. We were delivering them late. We were delivering them unsafely, and for a healthcare company, that's particularly embarrassing because, as a healthcare company, you want the people that participate in your company to go away healthier than they left you. So if we were injuring people on our projects, that was particularly embarrassing. I was asked in Chile a few years ago what I thought the acceptable injury rate per $1 million, the acceptable injury and death rate was per $1 million. I was a little bit baffled by it, and at risk of either being escorted to the airport early or being asked to stay for a very long time, I said, well, I think my answer is zero. Not only is injury and death unacceptable completely, but people should go away from our projects safer than they did before. So I'm digressing, but so in 2003 I was working for Sutter Health. We were seeking a new way of doing things, and so we came across Will Lichtig was our outside counsel at that time. He is now a recovering lawyer. He's working for the Bolt Construction Company now, and he led us to Greg Howell and Glenn Ballard, who who had then just begun LCI, and we went to a conference in Las Vegas, and grasped hold of lean construction philosophies, and then began a journey of changing a large organization. Admittedly, we had a bully pulpit because we were able to say, this is the way that we're going to deliver our projects from now on. And we gathered 250 people in a room and said, 250 firms across Northern California, contractors, architects, subcontractor, tradesmen, engineers, and said, we welcome you to be a signator to a manifesto that identifies what we call the 5 big ideas: to collaborate, really collaborate, to increase relatedness, to treat projects as a network of commitments, to optimize the whole instead of the parts, and to tightly couple learning with action. And we said to this 250 people, if this is the way we're doing this, if you want to join us, that's great. We understand it's not for everyone, no hard feelings, and good luck. And to date, every single firm that has declined that has come back. I don't know whether that was just economical and, again, bully because there's a lot of work, but I think that they got value out of it. So I want to go through the bulk of this presentation is going to be history about how this came about. And it's both complicated and simple. And then I'll try to hit my mark of about 30 minutes or 30, 40 minutes. And then I'm going to count on the interaction with you guys to really dig out some questions from me. And if I don't think you're digging at me enough, I'll make up the hard questions, and then we'll go at it. We'll see if we can rile you up a little bit. Okay, so here's the bulk of this presentation. I'll go through a few definitions. I find that this is valuable initially, so we all get on the same page. I'm going to go right into a short video, and that really is going to give you the bulk of an understanding of what a very mature integrated project delivery project organization can be like. It'll really give you a feel. There are some things I'd like to have you pay attention to in that video. One is that it shows the 6th floor of a building in downtown San Francisco where we had a co-located space for 2 years to redesign actually, a $1.7 billion hospital in downtown San Francisco. So on the walls, you will see the virtual workplace where each of the cluster groups in the organization, broken down roughly by trade or discipline, were on a day-to-day basis posted their progress on that particular area of the project so that everybody could see it at any time, right? And then the other part is notice that as you look around the floor in the film, the organization is not by contractor but by cluster as well. So in a particular area, like the mechanical area, it's hard to see, but you will have representatives from not only mechanical, but also mechanical trade, but also the electrical trade, and also the mechanical engineer and mechanical and electrical engineer and architecture and owner, right? So everybody is in a representative of each of the parts of the project were actually sat in that area. So then I'll go through a little bit of history, some press, some discussion, and I'll make a couple of, since I'm speaking, I'm going to give you my opinion, and not that it's the right opinion, but it is an opinion. So, lean. Let's just be clear about that. From the Toyota production system, right? Creating more value for customers with fewer resources, right? Now, I realize it can be much more complicated than that, but in very simple terms, that's what we'll focus on. Creating more value for customers with fewer resources. And in the context of construction projects, when you're talking about production on the production line in manufacturing, they're really concentrating on flow. Flow of resources, flow of communication, flow of the product down the production line, right? Okay, so lean construction. Define it as a production management-based approach to project delivery. Extending from lean, it seeks to maximize value and minimize waste. Flow in lean construction is the reliable handoff of work from one participant to the next downstream participant, or one performer to the next downstream performer, right? So that reliable handoff of work is the same as flow on a production line. IPD, oops, sorry. I want to make sure I get this right now. Apologies. I was telling a really interesting story about struggling with technology earlier. Gunther, right? Yeah. I was on a Microsoft. There we go. I was on a Microsoft project on the East Coast not too long ago, and I have all Apple equipment, right? And so one of the vice presidents was sitting in the audience, and he was drawing something on a Post-it note, and I turn around and point something at the screen, and he snuck up and he put a Post-it note over my Apple symbol, and he replaced it with a Microsoft Windows, right? And the irony of it is that he said I was scheduled to go give a talk the next week at the Microsoft headquarters in Bellevue, Washington, and they said, "Don't bring those Apple products to the right." And and so I left it in the bag, and I handed somebody a thumb drive that had my presentation on it, and she kind of looked at it, and long story short is she had difficulty doing everything we needed to do on Microsoft equipment because it only had one USB port, right? So it was a little ironic. Anyway, that's my technological struggle story. Okay, IPD is a project delivery approach that integrates people, systems, business structures, and practices to optimize project results. And ILPD is really the most recent interaction of that, making sure that the word lean is brought into the IPD arena, right? Okay, so let's take a look at this video.
Integrated project delivery works, first of all, by an integrated team of builders, designers, consultants, trade partners, all coming together and first of all understanding that they have to advocate for the customer, for all of the stakeholders in the project, and for each other on the team, to drive value into the building project and to drive waste out of the project. We're not in it in order to increase our own profit. We're trying to reduce costs so that the owner can afford the things that they want most. And in order to make something like that work, what's really important is you have to have the owner's participation in that. That owner has to be there, participate in that process, and be constantly informing the team about what are those things which are of greatest value to them.
Integrated project delivery requires that people set aside their personal interests and move towards the benefit of the collective.
The Cathedral Hill Hospital project is a perfect project for us to work together to try to create the most integrated team, the most integrated processes, and as a result, the most integrated project delivery system.
It's incredibly complex. It's a huge project, but it doesn't have to. That doesn't have to then get made worse by antagonistic behavior. Us versus the contractor, us versus the architect. And in an integrated team, you absolutely cannot have that. It has to be collaborative.
In this process, everybody's at the table at the same time. You get your plumbing perspective, you get your mechanical perspective, you get your architectural perspective, your planning perspective, your design perspective, and they all come together.
It solves a lot of problems. We don't get into these conflicts then between one player on the team trying to protect their own profit or protect themselves against another member of the team. We're all here in order to do what's the right thing for the owner.
I have a very high degree of confidence that when I leave the 6th floor, these teams are actually talking to one another. They're proactively finding the problems and they're bringing them to me and to the other leaders of the project before they become unsolvable.
This is even more important now with our economic downturn to assure that the project will actually be built.
The whole idea is that you're going to spend less because it's effectively you're doing the thoughtful work now that prohibits rework, bad work later. In return, what you get is a much higher degree of certainty that you will actually bring this project in on budget or even under budget.
You can see it in the results. We're about 15% below the market average for the cost of the project. We're driving value deep into the project in terms of customer satisfaction.
Without the good work that we've done so far, we would be unable to proceed with the largest project that Southern Health will probably ever do.
One way to make sure that we integrate as much as possible is to use new tools in technology, like building information modeling and 3D modeling. The design is being done in 3D. All of our detailing, the specific parts and pieces of the project, are being detailed in 3D.
Just a simple embrace of innovation now is what is going to make us successful. And the Bolt Company and the Smith Group collectively have been able to instill that in all of the project participants in order to accomplish that.
The future of integrated project delivery is going to grow and it's going to increase in the industry because we now have results. We have projects that are coming in at lower cost. We have projects that are coming in ahead of schedule. And we have projects that together are driving more value for the customer. So we're proving that this works.
Okay, why IPD? Construction industry participants live in silos, right? No matter how hard we try, historically, we all have our own life in our own organization, our own culture, our own economic strata or economic reality in our businesses, right? And so we relate, historically, we relate to projects from those silos. Productivity over time in the construction industry has declined during the very same time that productivity, especially in manufacturing, but in all other non-farm endeavors, has increased over the last 3 to 5 decades. We produce construction projects that are over budget, behind schedule, and do not produce the intended quality that we originally set out to put forth. A perfect example is at Southern Health, we would build ambulatory surgery centers run out, it'd be late, we'd get in arguments, we'd run out of budget, and then in the end we would only be able to fit out 3 of the 5 operating rooms because we didn't have enough money for equipment, right? We all have these problems. And we kill and injure too many people. This is the hard reality of construction. In 2013, in the United States, we killed 796 workers, right? So that is it's a very, very sobering. Now that is just a little bit of improvement, but over the last years or over the previous years, but still terribly unacceptable, right? So that's why we're doing this. Greg Howell, putting together this presentation, even though I lived through it, I took the opportunity to interview Greg and interview Glenn and interview Will and interview a few others. And I don't know if you ever met Greg, but he has a great sense of humor. And he warned me that the progression of integrated project delivery in the United States was not linear, just more like cattle grazing, right? And they just sort of came upon a lot of the stuff as they kept digging into it. But my story is going to be as linear as it gets. And Greg and Glenn are both okay with it, but it's not this simple. So first we got Glenn Ballard and Greg Howell, and they were basically together working on productivity measures, largely in petrochemical plants in West Texas, and they were finding that even though they were seeking to increase productivity or point productivity in certain sectors of the projects, they weren't having much success. So that simply led to the invention of the last planner system. And just somewhat later than that, in the mid-90s, they moved a little bit farther after inventing the last planner system, established the Lean Construction Institute. There was the Lean Construction Institute was initially intended to be a research organization. They wanted to take, and they were doing that. The Lean Construction Institute, of course, has become the premier lean trade organization over time, really. And 2 other things happened. They actually, I want to give credit to 2 more people. So Glenn and Greg are almost always solely credited for the Lean Construction Institute, but Iris Tomaline was there, and so was Todd Zabel. And if you ever want to meet a smart person, meet Iris Tomaline. She is incredible. So anyway, I want to make sure that we give credit as due. Lean Construction Institute also created the company that I work for now, or Glenn and Greg and Iris and Todd created Lean Project Consulting, and it was originally intended to take the concepts from the research part into projects and try them in a practical sense. And they soon realized that that was better done in a consulting environment rather than a research environment. The academics were getting in the way, and there were some other parts of that, but that's the simple part. And then that spun off, and now Glenn and Greg and Iris are all 3 running the P2SL organization at Cal, the Project Production System Laboratory, who has now taken over the sort of research part of it, pure academic research part of it, from the Lean Construction Institute. And the Lean Construction Institute is doing a terrific job of advancing lean principles and understanding across the industry. And then, so this sort of linear progression of Greg and Glenn, the last planner, the Lean Construction Institute, then resulted in Will Lichtig writing in 2005, writing the first relational contract. He was already working on one for Sutter Health, hadn't really formulated it that well. Greg and Will began to discuss the work of Ian McNeil on relational contracting, and that had come to Greg's attention 15 years before, and resulted in Will writing that document. That document is now commonly referred to as the IFOA, and its original name, to be clear, is the Integrated Agreement between Owner, Architect, and Contractor. And somehow IFOA stuck. IFOA doesn't really stand for all of those things, but somehow the IFOA stuck, and then over time it's become referred to as the integrated form of agreement. We seem to make things simple somehow, but that's its history. So there's only one truly parallel track that I can see, and that's Owen Matthews in Florida, was running a mechanical company, and independent from Greg and Glenn's work, began to use they were working for Disney projects, and no matter what they were doing, they were having trouble delivering projects. So no matter what agreement form they had with the owner, whether it was Disney or others, they independently created an IPD form of a joining agreement among the trades to, in essence, agree on the behavior in which they were going to deliver projects. And they had great success. They did truly collaborate. Owen Matthews trademarked the term IPD. Later, there was an agreement with Greg and Glenn and LCI to be able to use IPD terms, and later on, the AIA, the American Institute for Architecture, got into the agreement and guidelines arena, and there was a touch of a conflict between the terms, but they in the end all agreed no harm, no foul, and so that's where IPD is today. So there are some resulting work right around the same time, starting in 2003, 2004, 2005, right when and then Will writes the IPD or the IFOA. Albarisi Construction in St. Louis had two notable projects that were partially the result of Will's work. They pulled on Will and said, "Can we use your IFOA to organize ourselves around these two projects, the Cardinal Glennon Hospital and the St. Croix Hospital, I think." And were successful. But the point here is that Owen Matthews' efforts were not so much an advancement of the movement, but were a part of their business. And then short-termed, even though they do continue to use it, they have not continued to advance. The Albarisi experience, the Sutter Health experience, right at the same time, were more of the result of the movement rather than part of the movement. Okay. So a little bit of timeline. Will writes the, or actually, excuse me, there have been some direct results of this. There have been contracts that came out of the whole movement. There have been tools that have come out of the whole movement, and there's been an entire vocabulary that's come out of the movement. So in terms of contracts, Will writes the IFOA in 2005. Consensus Docs is an organization that had, and I'm going through this because we largely think of this initially, IPD as two things. One is people getting together and collaborating to produce the construction job or the project, and we immediately go into contracts, right? There's more to it, and I'm getting into that in a second. So Will writes the IFOA in 2005. Consensus Docs was an independent organization that has many different forms of construction contracts, began to write a document. Will got wind of it and ended up collaborating with them and others, the AIA and the Associated Contractors Association, Associated Group for AGC? Association of General Contractors, thank you. So they wrote theirs in 2006. The AIA, after a conference in Half Moon Bay near San Francisco, resulted in a guideline and another agreement that has had limited success. Howard Ashcraft then picked up the torch when Will moved away from the legal industry, picked up the torch and has probably the most fervent IPD agreement on the market today. There's a difference between Will's approach and Howard's approach. Will wrote a document that combined the relational part with the legal part. That is, the IFOA talks about using the last planner system. It has the 5 big ideas in it. It really has the behavioral element as well as the legalistic aspect of it in the agreement. Howard stripped the behavioral out and went to the legalistic part first, and then allowed teams to put legalistic part in addenda to the contract. Say it again? But yeah, did I say legalistic? I'm sorry. Allowed teams to put the behavioral part back. Thank you for the correction. So that has changed a little bit now in the last few years. Owners, the likes of Amgen, Boston General in Boston, other prominent owners have requested Howard to put a few of the behavioral aspects back, talking about requiring the last planner system and talking about things like 5 big ideas. And then there's a whole host of IPD Light, and the IPD Light stuff is really hybrids. So design build, design bid build, design assist, but still using parts of IPD agreements to actually get the construction or the contract done. I'm going to speed up a little bit here. Some of the projects that have been a result of this, again, Sutter Health, Alparese Construction. The Bolt Construction Company is probably the leader in IPD, perhaps in the world. They have construction projects nationwide. In fact, they just held a roundtable 3 weeks ago in Appleton, Wisconsin, trying to dig into the idea of really what the word integration means. How do we really define it? And it's not quite as simple as we've been thinking, and then hundreds of others. Tools, you recognize, I'm sure you recognize all of these. Some, like the last planner system, were invented as a result of the movement, and some have been borrowed from others, mostly Toyota, to apply to IPD. And vocabulary. If you guys don't have this document, I just screenshot a couple of IPD terms like actual cost and affordable cost. Both these terms were really promulgated because of an integrated project delivery agreement. And but if I would highly recommend getting on the LCI website and downloading this document. It's a really good accumulation of a glossary of terms. So as far as press, very simply, originally the press was cautious, then became optimistic, like this ENR article about what we were doing at Sutter Health. Then it became sort of negative and questioning again, but the most recent iteration is that the very same authors of press like ENR and others that were beginning to question again are now coming back, and the most current iterations are now very positive again. Some holistically and some positive about just parts of IPD, like bringing all the participants that you logically and reasonably can to the table early on, right? So I think when we talk about understanding IPD, and Allison made a really good shot at this just now, and also demonstrated, I think, how difficult it is to really understand the depth of IPD. We often initially think of it as just the project participants coming together and collaborating, right? And so we put last planner on projects and have them make and secure reliable promises and look ahead. And that's great. But the fact is that all projects have three domains. There's the domain of the organization, there are the commercial aspects and agreements on projects, and there is the operating system. Now, Greg and Glenn's approach and the sort of pure IPD approach is to initially, and the thing that Last Planner does is it shifts our thinking away from just concentrating on the parts and pieces of the project to looking at the operating system, improving the operating system. And if the operating system is functioning well, then the project will run well, right? There's that focus. But the fact is that integration really applies to all three domains. And for example, Owen Matthews did a really good job of identifying, in terms of the commercial structure, how do you move money across traditional boundaries? That is, when they got to the part where the electrician usually does a hookup, but it's more logical and reasonable for the mechanical guy to do that particular electrical hookup, then move money across that traditional boundary so that the most logical and reasonable participant actually does the work, right? And then the rest of it. You really need to think of this in terms of not just one aspect, but more holistically, right? Okay. I'm 1 minute over my longest allowable time, but I'm gonna get through these last few slides here quickly, and then we'll start. I think we're arguing, but we're really just starting to get along, right? That's what we're looking at next. So, for future, one of the things that I think is really important, and this is a real mind shift, is that lean construction, integrated project delivery, the last planner system, and target value design all offer the opportunity for project participants to move away from deconfliction, I'm going to explain this in a second, to synergy. The fact is that management structures from the Industrial Revolution to now have been concentrating on deconfliction. That is, CPM scheduling seeks to eliminate the conflicts between participants that are doing the project. And what we're saying, and that's great, as long as they're not in conflict with each other, preventing each other from doing work, then everything's okay. The fact is that CPM scheduling has been only so effective, right? We still have projects that are failing. So lean construction and integration and collaboration offer us the opportunity to move to synergy rather than just deconfliction. Yes? We have the opportunity to better deliver projects if we can help each other do that, collaborate with each other to do that, and not just be out of each other's ways, sitting back safely in our silo. If you haven't read Dave Albert's Power to the Edge, I really recommend it. It's really rough. It's very dense. It's very about. He comes from the War College in the United States. It's about future management in the activity of military engagements, right? But it has a lot to offer, and one of it is this idea of moving away from deconfliction towards synergy. And the other part of it that's really terrific is how are we going to behave as if our goal, and I agree with this goal, if our goal is to empower the frontline manager to take advantage of opportunities in the field, admittedly in an unpredictable environment, how are we going to interact with new technology and the ability to quickly communicate between those frontline managers to take advantage of that synergy, right? So it's really terrific stuff. When we move away from just simply by using a last planner system, you're breaking down silos, and you're moving away from just concentrating on the activity towards concentrating on and improving a more holistic realm of the project. How do we best gather together in order to better deliver the project? And so now, but in a futuristic aspect, we also need to go a little bit farther and talk about global optimization, right? So not only just the project participants, but also all the way into the supply chain, right? How do we interact with that, and does our activity enable the best behavior and operations system that can feed and enable the success of the project. All right. So there are two things I want to talk about here. IPD, as we see, basically from the 80s till now, has evolved in a certain way. We have the best news, I think, is that we have owners that are demanding it, right? And major owners on major projects that are demanding. Sutter Health is one. Like I said, Amgen, Microsoft to some extent, Intel to some, the other major groups are demanding it, and that's great. There are two things that put this at risk. Glenn is actually holding a P2SL event yesterday and today in Berkeley, and one of the things he's doing is delivering partial results of a study that they did on 32 IPD projects in Northern California. And they had some great successes. So the IPD offers you the opportunity to deliver a project and get it all. To deliver it early, to deliver it for less money, to deliver it for better quality, and to deliver it safer, right? It moves away from the old trade-off realm that we've been living in for so many years. This study has 6 of the 32 projects where the trade participants did not make any money, quote unquote. So, meaning that they made at least 50% less than they were projecting that they would make going in, or nothing, right? So there's a couple of ways to look at it. One is it's only 20% out of the sample, right? So 80% of them made their profit. There's no denying that IPD you have a better chance of everybody making what they're supposed to or more, right? Delivering it better in all ways. Now, that group, that 20%, didn't make as much money as they had intended. There are two things that are unanswered. One is answered, that those projects still were of good quality, and they were still of reasonable cost, right? And were safe and not necessarily on schedule. They were not on schedule. They were not actually under budget, but close to cost. So they weren't astronomical blow-ups, right? But the fact is that if there is a sector that if that 20% of people did not make money, if that is not improved, then it questions whether the movement will continue to have support from the trades moving forward, right? If there's a 20% chance of loss, admittedly smaller than if you just go out and do a hard bid project, but this is a part of it that needs to be paid attention to, because there is a portfolio of risk in a construction company's endeavors, right? You're looking for, just as in terms of investment, you could go out and hard bid and have part of your portfolio as high risk and the possibility of high reward, right? Just like if you were investing on the stock market. IPD is the other end of that, where it is a very solid low risk for people, but still has this 20% part as we're seeing it, right? So we just need to be careful of looking at this in terms of making sure that all of the parties on an IPD project actually come out in the end winners, right? That there is no, if there is one entity that ends up challenged, then it'll question the longevity moving forward. The second part is there's a question in IPD we've always had from owners that says, how do we assure that you're getting market value if everything you're doing is kumbaya and collaboration and trust-based? You know, right now, Dave, the market is down, and I can go out on the street and contractors are going to give me a better price, right? It's just, yes? So, for a long time, we talked about this in terms of, well, the answer is benchmarking. And it never really settled very well. It is an answer. It's a pretty good answer. But benchmarking is still a subjective endeavor, right? There is this idea in IPD about the agreement is cost plus. And so we have not yet stabilized or made consistent across all of the disciplines and the contracts what the idea of cost actually is. Now, this is a very sensitive subject because are there, well, I'm just going to blurt it out. Large construction companies do not continue to operate on 1%. Just, right? That's just unrealistic. So traditionally, how do they make more money? Owners are responsible for this. We kept saying, we want it for less, we want it for less, we want it for less. We still want the quality, we still want you on time, we still want you to do we want the lowest price, right? Well, the lowest price is not necessarily the right thing to do. So I think that, and as a result, we've forced construction companies to have revenue sources that are not directly related to the actual placement of work and are not reflected in the fee. That is what the profit is declared to be. So we haven't dug into this as a movement yet to just stabilize the idea of cost into the details of the estimate. For example, take the rental of a truck, right? So we start the project. We know it's going to be a three-year project, and you have in the United States, a construction company will provide a truck to a superintendent and charge rent on that truck. So, but how is rent charged on the truck? We see examples of construction companies going to a rental company. From an owner's perspective, I want to pay a rental fee that's commensurate with the value of that asset. I don't want to pay for that truck 3 times over the course of the project, right? So a construction company goes to a rental yard and rents the truck. I'm paying more for that truck over a 3-year period than if we had bought it and then written it down over time. Second way is a construction company will buy the truck and rent it to the project and rent it for the same amount over the 3 years rather than writing it down to a new value on the second year, writing it down to a lower value on the third year. I'm still not at cost if it's the same rental, right? So this idea of what is cost. And then even worse, a construction company forms a rental company inside their company and rents it to the project at the consistent cost over the 3 years. I'm not getting the devalued cost for the owner, is not getting the devalued cost over time. And in the state of California, I'm now paying tax on top of that because it's coming from a rental company. So I'm not saying I know the right way, but this idea of how do you actually get to cost across the board is a real issue, right? So I think those are the two things that we need to concentrate on in the short term to assure that the movement has longevity, that the movement is really healthy and honest. And in the end, that cost, if we get to a unified idea of that, will give us the ability to know that we're getting market value over market cycles, because we'll be dealing with fee. So the idea is that in a low market, a contractor will bring a lower fee to keep their people on busy or the likes, and in a higher market they'll likely have a higher fee, but it will still reflect the market cycles and make it easier for the boards of directors and the likes to take the information and be settled with it, right? Yes, I'm stopped. And thank you for yelling at me.
That was not a yell. I'll show you a yell if it comes. Thank you very much. Let's give him a hand. There's a lot to talk about, so I think I'll just give the word free. If when you start talking, you'll just state your name so we know who you are before you start speaking. But otherwise, is there any comments? Alan?
How long do we have for this Q&A?
We've got half an hour. Anybody who's got a comment? Alan has.
You know, softball.
No chance. No
Easy.
chance. You say that 20% chance of loss is too much. How much is enough?
Do you know what a softball is?
No, we don't play at this side of the pond.
I don't know. Next. You know, the point is that it just has to be fair for all parties, and now, you know, understand that the risk going into it is if you don't perform in some way, then you don't make profit. So just to normalize across this room, a typical integrated project delivery agreement has an element of risk and reward. That is, your guaranteed cost paid for by the owner, right? And if you perform to a certain level, then everybody gets, you put your profit at risk, and if you perform at a certain level, then you get your profit. If you perform better than expected, you have the ability to increase your profit. If you perform not as well as expected, then the first course of action is that your profit is reduced, right? So the particular projects we're talking about, did not go as well as planned, either by cost or by schedule or by safety or by quality. So that is the deal. And I'm not taking away from that in my statement. That is, in an IPD agreement, you are guaranteed cost. So the contractor and the architects and the engineers and the trades people are guaranteed that they are not going to have a catastrophic loss and lose their business, for example, right? So where the industry settles on where that risk is the right risk has yet to be determined. If you take all the risk out of it, right, then why are we doing it? But it is a part of the deal that it ends up fair across the board, and what I'm saying is that we can't set up a system that stacks the deck for the owner, right? Or any one party. It has to be fair across the board.
Exactly. And you said you wanted everyone to be a winner. And, for me, that suggests that 0% chance of loss is the order of the day. And the reason we've got this pain share, gain share is as an incentive.
Yes.
And is it sufficient that the incentive is all one way, so there's gain share but no pain share?
No, it's not. I think a balance is the right place.
And it's somewhere between 20% and 0%.
Yet to be determined.
Yeah.
It is I think this is a tip of the spear topic that will need to be sorted out here in a little while.
Right.
And the other part of that conversation is the idea of identifying costs. I'll tell you that if the owners begin to understand that if they go with this, then it's questionable of whether they're getting a fair deal or not, you're going to start to see CEOs digging their heels in, and we're going to have the same reaction to cost plus as we did several decades ago, and it'll be out the window. So paying attention to these things, I think, is important, and bringing them out in the open to talk about them to get to the right place, right?
Yeah, making sure everyone can see the elephants is really important.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're likely to get trapped.
Right. Now, do you know what a softball is? Yeah. Okay. Actually, I'm making fun of it. I want you to dig into this. I want you guys to dig into this. Ask the hard questions. This is your opportunity to ask the hard questions and really press, right?
My name is Frank Slemming, and my daily life is as a site manager here in Copenhagen. I have one question on your IPD projects. What if people don't collaborate, or what if they don't work with the team, sub-optimize, or have other agendas?
Yeah.
How do you cope with that in practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for the first 10 years that I was doing this, I was doing it on the owner side. So I had a bully pulpit. Thou shalt collaborate, or else, right? And there is there is some of that. It certainly helps if you're working in an environment where the owner has brought this to the table, or is at least supportive. And one of the things we talk about early on is to get buy-in from the highest level of the organization, meaning meaning the owners, but all of the organization, and then teach them what it means to be supportive of the process, because it's a little bit different sometimes in a collaborative environment. Here's a recent example. I have a project that has a design team that is largely remote, quite a bit remote from the project, and there is not even a once-a-week visitation from the architects and engineers on the project. Once a month for sure, but not even once a week. There are weekly long-distance meetings, both video and conference calling, and we've gone in and established Last Planner pretty fervently on the project itself. The project participants, superintendents, tradespeople are doing Last Planner pretty well, and they're slamming into design. And the architects have not, the A&E part of this project have not seemed to be listening. They're pretty much entrenched in their way of doing business. Now, I want to go on record. I'm not picking on architects. You brought them up. I didn't bring them up. But we've made requests. We've made assessments. The owner's representative has made declarations. Before they started this, they all got around the room and they did not sign a manifesto, but they all agreed to go lean. And yet, we still have this incredibly, almost daunting, for example, the submittal process. When you map it, it goes from the detailed drawing goes from the trade to the construction manager's receptionist to logs it in, then to the CM manager, and then back to that receptionist, logs it, stamps it, back to the receptionist, and it sends to the architect. And the architect logs it and puts it and gives it to the construction manager, the architect's construction manager, who looks at it and logs it, stamps it, and back to the receptionist, and then sends it to the engineer, and it's just like, it's painful, right? And even though we made requests and specific observations, assessments about it, we're still seeing the same behavior. And in fact, next week I will be there for a sort of summit to get past this and to sign a manifesto that, in essence, is the 5 big ideas. All right. So now it's moving past just the owner requesting it, and the owner owns this contract, right? It's still not being effective. It's still not quite getting through. And so now the team has decided to move towards getting them in a room and making the direct and specific requests around a change of behavior, right? So there's a lot of peer pressure aspect of it. There's a lot of, in the end, you would see the removal of that firm or individual if they continue to thwart the progress of the project, if they can't get around it, if they can't work around it. And the idea is not to do workarounds. The idea is to address it. So you know, you can paraphrase that story any way you want. I think it's a matter of opening it up to discussion, making requests, specific requests to get specific promises, and then holding people accountable for their promises. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Eric, and then I would like to ask you about you. Do you have any experience with the combination with the large planner and location-based scheduling in the US?
Yes. I mean, Alan has gotten me to understand that what we're calling tech time, he's referring to it as location based. Is that true? Okay.
They're similar and different. There's a paper by Glenn and Olli Sapanen from Finland, which talks about what's similar and what's different. And I think it was in the 2012 IGLC papers. I can't remember which.
Well, is the similarity the rhythm?
Yeah.
So, yes. So on our projects, the first course of action is to get stability on the project, and that is the formal last planner. So we get people making and securing reliable promises and looking ahead, and that gets this level of stability on the project that people that action relieves the innovative energy of project participants. They become, all of a sudden now, they're not putting out fires on the project, and they're innovating. And I had a superintendent on one of my projects that said, David, when he first started this, I thought the only thing this means is more meetings for me. And I was right. It is more meetings. But I have so much more time on my hands now than I did. It's remarkable, right? So and every superintendent that gets into it, they end up all in. I'm never doing another project without it again, that kind of thing. But you get a project team that's reliably promising, as reflected in the PPC, for example, and they're hovering between 70 and 85, 90%, 75 to 85, 95, 90, 95% PPC across a project. I'm not an advocate for 100% teams. If you're getting 100% all the time, I don't think the teams are pressing themselves enough. I'm actually getting to the answer to your question. The next step is, when you have a healthy group like that, how do you then get them a little bit deeper? And my answer has been, you small batch them, right? So they're planning they're planning more effectively. They have this great stability, and they're challenging themselves. They're healthy, happy, settled down. Pressure is off their shoulders. And how do they challenge themselves? Started looking at smaller iterations and the parade of trades, right? Where you get these concurrent, as measured in line of balance, for example. And I'm not an advocate of automatically going to line of balance, because it's still an after-fact reporting, but you're looking for those parallel lines in line of balance, right? So we use tack time and much more tighter iteration planning to be that next step of challenge. And it's the hardest simple thing you will ever do. Yes.
Sven, and then Christina, and then Stig.
Yes, my name is Sven Bertelsen, and I'm researching, and I'm really a consulting engineer here in Denmark, and I've been working with lean principles in construction since 1991 and 92. But anyway, I have a question to you as a project manager for hospital projects, and that is, how do you prioritize or balance cost against velocity? That means fast completion versus higher or smaller costs. You know, we are saying that the hospital starts to lose its production value as soon as it has been put into operations, and its effective lifetime may be as little as 5 years before it's outdated, and probably shouldn't be there for more than 10 years, and then we should tear it down again. And that means, just like your pharmaceutical suppliers, you have to consider the lifetime of your projects against the production costs. How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. And I think there have been partial answers over several different delivery models. The public-private partnerships movement, although I have some disagreement with parts of it, does a pretty good job of handling this life cycle aspect, because the private partner is faced with maintaining it, and so those groups tend to focus on a 35-year frame rather than, right? So I guess the idea from my perspective is to get focused on a 35-year frame instead of a 5 or 10-year frame. I found that has to be either be or become a priority of the owner, right? You know, when we started in Sutter Health, we were not. I mean, we were satisfied with our efforts if we could just start, right? And we knew that that life cycle cost was really the next step. There's another part of it that complicates this idea of moving to a longer life cycle mind frame, thought process, and that is dealing with the financial, like the COO or the CFO. Often the CFO, often when you're talking about investing the money today for increased life cycle, when you talk with the financial groups about that, they say, you know what, and here's the justification. It's better if we pay for it now because it's going to cost less money. And the COO or the CFO says, I don't care if it costs 5 times because that's a different funding cycle. And between now and then, I can make 10 times the money if I invest it. So I don't have a magic answer, but the idea of the appropriate and right-termed life cycle is an important conversation to have initially. The initial project definition, I think, is a place to have that. And the fact is that I don't care who it is, what country it is, owners do not communicate their value proposition very well. Often they don't even know what the value proposition is, let alone how to communicate it, right? So that's why, that really is the the magic in target value design, because in target value design, how am I going in time? Okay, I can at least finish the sentence. The idea of target value design is taking this type of thing into account, having the right conversation with the right people at the table, with the right level of detail at the right time, right? So, I sense you want to go ahead. Go ahead.
The reason for my question was really that I see a possible solution to your establishing a better collaboration in your product production. And that is that if you can convince all participants that velocity, the faster we produce by the same resources, of course, means an increased productivity, then there's a tremendous benefit for all participants there. Yeah. So you can find a common goal in terms of money or in terms of profit, but you can reach it through using the lean principles, which to me means speed, or velocity is a true term. But if you can increase the velocity in your product production by say 10 or 20%, you will have an enormous earning all around for all participants. And that may be the common incentive instead of a lot of nice words and terms and so on. This is cool cash. If you can convert it into that, you can get participants on board.
Yes.
A short comment, David, and then we go on to the next question.
Okay.
Yeah, from you. Short comment from you.
Okay. I agree with almost everything you said. It worries me when we talk about concentrating on velocity, if we're letting other things like quality and safety and go by the wayside. That is, you know what I mean? I don't disagree with what you said. I caution us that it sounds like a good solution on a certain number and type of projects. That is, I don't think that there's a universal answer, but I think your answer is a good one.
Christina?
Hi, good morning. I wanted to ask you about TBD. When you started working at the Cathedral Hill Hospital, the team challenged itself to lower the price before fixing, locking the EMP.
Yeah.
And why would every dollar they reduce from the EMP, it's a risk they're taking in the future. What encourages the team to lower the price before locking it down?
Yeah.
Do you still believe this is the way to go?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I didn't say when I talked about the small percentage of the sample that did not perform as well, the six projects out of the 32 I talked about earlier, is that we've come to the conclusion that ultimately the reason that they did not fully succeed was that they did not adhere fully to the tenets of integrated project delivery and target value design, right? So in every case, they wavered away from the tenets, and in every case, they were not as successful as they could be. So now here's my direct answer to your question. I don't like to start things, thinking about things in terms of contracts. I prefer that we establish the behavior on contracts. And by the way, I know I didn't say this, but this has nothing to do with the tools, and it has nothing to do with contracts. This is all about the behavior that is a result of the tools and the contracts. It's the behavior we're seeking to change, not the tools and the contracts. So in a case of target value design, why would a team work to reduce the cost? Because the agreement supports that behavior by assuring them that they are going to get their cost and then deal with profit on top of it. So they are protected. And their agreement does not say, like a lot of architects' agreements, that I get paid based on the ultimate cost of the project. So that as the cost of the project goes up, I get paid more. That's in direct conflict to the behavior that we're asking in target value design, which is to reduce the cost. If you have an agreement where I get paid more if the price that goes up, I'm incentivized to raise the price, right?
Yeah, but that's after locking the EMP. I mean, once you've locked it down, once you've said this is the contract value we're working towards, what's
Yes.
the incentive before that? Maybe I understood it wrong, but I thought that when you started, you had a price, a budget, and you challenged the team to lower that price at 10%, and then you locked down that number.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had gone all the way to the realization that you're all the way into IPD and you've established the EMP, right? And let's talk about that a second. So with target value design, the reason why target value design is so important is that in all projects you have a business planning element, right? And typically the organization does business planning and they decide that they want a project for a certain cost that does these things, and what's the first thing that they do? Hire an architect. And the architect traditionally has taken it on themselves to be the translator of the owner's value proposition to the construction community. This is what we do, right? Well, in target value design, you take that a little further. You have business planning that asks and answers the question, if we build this thing, it makes good business sense. And the very first thing you do is you get project participants, as many that's logical and reasonable, together in the room, and you do a validation study. And that validation study asks and answers the question, can we build this? Yes, no, or yes if. If no, in almost all cases actually, but if no, then you conform back to business planning, and business planning says, okay, we think we can afford some more, so go. Or no, we can't afford more. This is there's a maximum price that we can pay for this. So if we can get less building, then we get less building in these ways, right? You conform back to business planning, and that group validates that information, right? So to get her direct question is, how do you motivate them to reduce the cost? It's typically done by incentives. That is, if as you reduce the cost, you perform better than average. And as the cost goes down, at a certain point, between the owner and the project participants, there is a share of the savings. So you have the opportunity to increase your profit. That's the contractual incentive that's in place, which you probably already knew, right? I don't think that money really incentivizes. I really think it's the behavior and the instilling the want in a team to deliver a project successfully. And this right here is the tricky part of how to communicate what leadership is in a lean environment. It's very much different. How do you get a team to want to successfully deliver the project? And I'm a behavioralist. I think that humans naturally want to do a good job. I don't think we go purposely going, you know what, I'm going to go build that chair and I'm going to do a shitty job. I don't think that's who we are as humans, right?
With that comment, I think we will stop the discussion now. I'm sorry, Steen, and I'm sorry, Michael. You will have to talk to David afterwards, if you'll still be here.
I will still be here, and I will say that you will like me much better when you don't have to listen to me.
But thank you very much, David. Let's give him a hand.